realm of publishing that from a place of more expertise, right? Because on one metric, I'm the most successful indie published author ever, but that metric was trading on my already established, traditionally published name. So I usually, we'll see what happens that week. So that'll cover 9 of our weeks. Several of our other weeks will be Q&A sessions. Usually what I like to do is I like to have 2 weeks on, say, plot, and then a Q&A on plot. 2 weeks on setting, then a Q&A on setting, 2 weeks on character, Q&A, 2 weeks on business, Q&A, right? And that should basically cover the class. In there somewhere, I do tend to try to squeeze in mini lectures on revision and a mini lecture on prose. So we'll see what we can do with those sorts of things. But let's talk about the beginning idea, my philosophy for this class. What is my philosophy for teaching and for teaching writing in particular? Because writing is kind of hard to teach. Not to make my job sound more cool, because it's kind of hard to teach because you will learn more than I can teach you in this class. Hey, how you doing? By writing your first book than myself or any person can possibly teach you, right? Writing as an art requires work and effort. Everything requires work and effort, but the thing about a lot of artistic pursuits like this is you need to start exploring with your style. Hey, you're back too. Good to see you. Exploring with your style, seeing how it goes, trying new things, revising, trying different things. And as you explore writing, you will get better and better, and you will know how to use the tools that people like myself give you. You will also know which tools to ignore. Because one of the key philosophies I have is writing advice is only as good as its ability to help you individually. You will get bad advice for you. You will get bad advice for you from me in this class, okay? I try hard not to give you too much of that, but the thing is, writing is so individual that what works for some writers doesn't work for others. For example, the one I often use because it hit me when I was young and I was working. I was reading a book by Orson Scott Card where he talked about writing, and in it he talked a lot about how important an outline was to his writing, and without it, his writing would become a disaster. I then later read an essay by Stephen King, may have even been on Writing, his famous writing book, where he talks about how an outline is the great destroyer of stories. And if you have an outline for your story, it's going to ruin your story. And these are polar opposites, right? And can you do both? Well, the answer is yes. Most everyone in this room is going to be some mix of what George R. Martin calls a gardener versus an architect. He's very good with words, and that's one of his descriptions that I love. He says some writers are an architect. They build themselves a structure for their story, like a house, and then they hang a story upon it. Other writers, he says, are like a gardener. They go out in the garden and they nurture something as it starts to grow, and then they see what it becomes. You might have heard the term pantsing for writing. People use that. The truth is that most writers are somewhere in between those two extremes, but you won't know where you are, and indeed, what a given project requires until you try both of them and make your own Frankenstein monster of a style and a process out of the things that everyone tells you and which you discover on your own, and that monster will grow and change through your career, and you will do different things. So, why am I sometimes going to give you bad advice? Well, it's because it works for 90% of authors, but you're the 10%. Or it might be the advice that is good for you 20 years from now when you've changed as an author and you're like, hey, I remember that thing, let's try that. But right now, it could be destructive. Our philosophy, my philosophy, is to treat you like a chef and not a cook. Those who've been in this class before know I love this metaphor. What does this metaphor mean? Well, in my definitions, a chef is someone like me when it comes to baking who can follow a recipe. And if I follow the recipe, usually I'll get what I'm trying to make. And it usually tastes something like what I'm trying to make. The problem is, if something goes wrong, I have no idea why it went wrong and what I could have done to change it. I have no idea what temperature does to baking, only that on this page it says bake it at 325, and if I do that, it usually turns out. I don't know the difference between baking soda and baking powder, except on the page it says use one and not the other, and if you mix them up, it's bad, right? That is what I will term a cook. What is a chef? Chef is a person who can tell you, well, when you add this ingredient, it does this. A chef is a person who can taste something and be like, oh, this is what went wrong. Let's try it this way next time and see if it improves it. A chef is someone who can take the various styles of baking that different people use and apply them to their own process and create new things, not from a recipe, but that use the knowledge of previous recipes to create masterful new works. I want you to be a chef when it comes to writing. I want you to learn all the tools and processes. I want you to try them. I want you to work with them. And as you do, learn how to create the effect you want to have with your stories as you write and finish them, rather than the effect other people say you should have. Your goals can be your own. And I'm slightly out of order here because let's talk about being a pro versus being a non-pro writer. It is okay, in fact, it is wonderful to be a non-professional writer. You can be in this class for any reason. You could have wandered in accidentally, seen that there were people here, and taken a seat. You weirdo. Right? You're welcome. You're welcome here. You can be here because you're like, that Sanderson guy, maybe if I take his class, I'll get a book signed. You shouldn't be doing that, but I'll make you learn anyway. And so it's good for you. You might be here because you're like, well, I need to have a certain number of writing credits, and this is the class that's in the evening that I can take. You might be here because you want to be a better GM. You might be here because you just love the process. Or you might be here, as the majority of you probably are, is because you're like, maybe I could become a professional science fiction fantasy writer. Those are all valid reasons to be here. I would guess the most common is those who want to be a pro and those who would like to learn to write a good book now and then as a hobby. Those are my most common students. Wonderful. I think writing is good for you. And one of the things you're going to have to confront when you're writing stories and you tell people about it, they're going to ask you a question. Have you been asked this question? What is it? Are you published? What are you going to do with this? How soon till you can take me out to dinner with the money you make from your books? Right? We live in a society that likes to approach things from a utilitarian eye. There are advantages to that, right? There are advantages to my mother, when I was 16, discovering that I wanted to be a writer and saying, that's nice, dear. You should be a doctor. And I'm like, but doctor, she's like, doctors have a lot of free time. You know how doctors are always golfing, right? Well, you could be a doctor who writes fantasy novels instead of golfing and also feeds your family. She really wanted a doctor, and she got none out of her 4 children. Yeah, no doctors. She got me. She got my brother who's in computer programming. That's close to being a doctor. And he got the closest. She got a teacher. And she got an artist / fashion designer / charity organizer. That's Jane, who runs Lightweaver for me. And so she got no doctors. She got none married to doctors, but she loves us anyway. There is an advantage to people saying that because you do need to ask those questions, right? But our society treats art too utilitarianly. It doesn't look at the primary purpose of art, which is making the artist's life more enriched. Is sincerely what I believe the primary purpose is. It is to make your life better by creating something. When you go play basketball, unless you happen to have a Wemby-esque height, people are probably not going to ask you after your game in the church gym, and you're like, oh, I get, and you maybe look more like me and they're not going to say, so when are you going to the NBA? They won't. But they will ask you when you're going to sell your writing. They're going to ask you if you're published, and that's okay. But I want you to understand that's not why you have to write. In fact, it's probably not why you should write. Writing is good for you. Expressing yourself is good for you. Creating art is good for you. That all said, we are going to pretend when you walk through those doors that every one of you is in the category that I mentioned that wants to be making a full-time living as a science fiction and fantasy novelist within the next 10 years. The reason for that is all the other advice that I would give you to be a better GM, or to be better at writing in your journal, or to be fulfilled as writing a book every 20 years, or every 5 years for your sisters like Jane Austen did. All of that advice is circumscribed in the advice I would give to the aspiring professional. And I want to give you all the possible tools that I can so that you can become that professional if someday you decide that you want to. But let's take a moment to look at it realistically. Probably the only time in this class that we will do that. Making a living as a professional novelist or as a professional musician working on kind of the highest record label touring level, or as a fine artist, not working in commercial illustration, these jobs are hard. Not that they're any harder to do than other types of the jobs, but they are harder to make a living at than other kinds of jobs. As a writer, there are lots of options open to you. I'm sure the university will tell you what they are. Scar wrote for a hearing aid company for how many years? 10 years. 10 years, wrote copy in the hearing aid company for their hearing aid books about,
how to operate the hearing aids.
How to operate the hearing aids. You can tell the enthusiasm in his voice. By the way, if you don't know Scar works at Dragonsteel. He is one of my executive assistants. Becky is the other one. She's back there. So they are here to facilitate making things happen and to get me in the place where I'm supposed to be at the time I'm supposed to be there. Dan went on. Dan, friend of mine, he wrote for the newsletter for a scrapbooking company. There are lots of those kinds of jobs. Writing fiction and making a living at it is hard. Now, it's not as hard as they told me when I was taking classes like this when I was young. It's not as hard as my mom thought. She would have told you it's 1 in a million. If you'd ask other people, they'd be like, 1 in 10,000, whatever. I took this class in 1999. Yeah, I know. I used to think of myself as the young guy. Now this is the young people over here. When I took this class in 99 from Dave Wolverton, who has since passed on. In that class was myself, Dan Wells, who went on to become a professional novelist, and Stacy, who became a professional editor, and Peter, who became a professional editor, as well as 2 people I would list as semi-pros. But there's 4 pros in that class of around 30 people, okay? That's pretty good. My odds have generally been in my 15-person class, 1 to a half of a person every year going pro. Depending on your definition of going pro, more than one will get a book published professionally, but 1 to a half of one a year, so one every 2 years, will go on to make a significant portion of their living from writing, is about the odds that we have had. Jancy took my class and she went full pro. Brian McClellan took my class, he went full pro. There's a bunch of them. I can't list them all right now. That's not because I'm such a great teacher. I hope that I'm good, but it's more along the lines of, if you are seriously dedicated to this and willing to invest 10 years in it, you probably got more like a 1 in 20 shot of making a significant portion of your income from writing than a 1 in a million. Now, that does not count the fact that a lot of people are going to give up before then, so it's probably less than better than 1 in 20, but you know, that's better odds than people pretend, right? You would not have thought that. Let's acknowledge that of the people that went pro that are my friends or in that class, only one of them is regularly hitting the New York Times bestseller list, right? But you can make a living without doing that or significantly contribute to your income. That said, if you went and took a class in the computer science department and the professor got up and said, I think maybe 1 in 20 of you can actually make some of your living at this. Maybe 1 in 50 fully on professional are going to be able to. You would leave, right? You would be like, I am going to chemical engineering. Oh, the chemical engineering. They have a 90-something% placement rate, right? Do you guys know what it is? It used to be the highest at BYU, which is why I use that one as a joke. Are you chemical engineers? My freshman roommate was a chemical engineer. If you've ever read the Mistborn books, Captain Conrad is based off of Tom Conrad, good friend of mine still. He went on to work for Intel. He is a glorified sewage treatment plant engineer, right? Because he cleans their water for Intel. That's his job. He loves cleaning water. He gets the dirty water and he figures out how to separate all the stuff out that you can sell for money and then make the rest of the stuff non-toxic so you can then dispose of it or